So I said on a previous video that I want to learn more about the CFL, the Canadian Football League, something I know very little, pretty much nothing about. I know obviously of the NFL and I've seen action from it, but for some reason the Canadian Football League I've never really came across footage of it or anything like that. So I know hockey is obviously huge and the most popular sport in Canada. So tell me if you're a fan of Canadian football, the CFL, tell me everything about it, the best teams, who you support, why you support them. This video I found is the differences between American football and Canadian football explained. So I thought this would give me a good understanding of the differences and give me a bit more info, a bit more background to Canadian football. So let's watch this.
Is between American and Canadian football. This is a game of American football. This is a game of Canadian football. They both look the same, so they must be the same sport, right? Well, no, not quite. There's several rule differences between the two that makes them almost completely different sports. Before I explain the differences, if you guys want a more detailed explanation of the rules, click here for American football and click here for Canadian football. Right, so differences. Let's start with the field. The Canadian field is both longer and wider than its southern counterpart. In American football, the field is 100 yards by 53 yards. In Canada, the football field is 110 yards by 65 yards. The reason why it's 110 yards in Canada is that Canada, with its love for everything of the metric system, originally specified that the field should be 100 metres, and 100 metres is roughly 110 yards. American football end zones are 10 yards long, with the goalposts at the rear. Canadian football end zones are 20 yards long, with the goalposts at the front. So how about the players?
Yeah, so interesting that the dimensions of the pitch are bigger and the end zones as well. Tell me how that affects play, if it does. I know that I'm a football fan, soccer fan. When there's a bigger pitch, it usually leads to more open play. Like the games can be... I prefer the games on a bigger pitch because the teams can have better passing moves and things. The play is not so congested. Is there any sort of similar effects with these bigger pitches on CFL?
There are 11 players on the field per side in American football. Canadian football has 12 players per side. In American football, only one man is allowed to move during the snap, and he can only move laterally or backwards. In Canadian football, anyone who isn't a quarterback or a lineman can move in any direction before the snap.
Oh, that's very interesting.
In American football, defensive players are allowed to line up at the line of scrimmage. In Canada, defensive players have to line up 1 yard away from the line of scrimmage. How about some rule differences?
Yeah, so again, with regards to like the players on there, quite stark differences. I know it doesn't seem like much, but I guess those things like the players having that space away from the defense, or the defense being so far away, all the players being able to move and things, it can really create quite a different game. But I'm just wondering in practice how it affects the game. Tell me in your opinion.
Differences. Well, in American football, you have 4 downs to make 10 yards. In Canadian football, you only have 3 downs to make those same 10 yards.
Pressure on each.
In American football, you can signal for a fair catch, allowing the receiver to catch the ball safely. The Canadians think that this is an abomination and they don't have a fair catch rule.
Nice.
In American football, you either have 25 seconds or 40 seconds to play the ball. In Canada, you only get 20 seconds. And you get a 2-minute warning in American football and a 3-minute warning in Canadian football. The scoring is exactly the same in both games, except in Canada, you get 1 point for missing a field goal. Wait, what? Missing a field goal? Yep, if you miss a field goal and it clears the end zone, the kicking team gets a point. This is known as a rouge, but is more commonly known as a single. You can also score a single by tackling the ball carrier in their end zone after a field goal attempt or punt attempt. To add further confusion, the kicker is allowed to recover his own kick so long as it travels 10 yards in Canadian football. In American football, it has to travel at least 10 yards and be touched by an opposing player. In American football, a missed punt or missed field goal is ruled dead and the play stops. In Canadian football, a missed punt or missed field goal is ruled live and the other team may run with the ball and try and score a touchdown. There are other rule differences between the two, but these are the main ones that you need to know about. So
so with those rule changes, I guess he's going to go into what it all means, but with those rule differences, it definitely seems like the Canadian football could be a bit more exciting. It's as if they're like creating these rules to make the play a bit more interesting. But I wonder then, is there ever any talk of, say, the NFL implementing any of these rules that are in the CFL? Where did this diversion in the rules and all these differences, where did it actually come from? How did it come about? Did whatever one came second, was it trying to be different from the other? What are the reasons for that? Like, it's really interesting me just because it really is almost like a completely different game.
What does all this mean? These rules generally mean that American football is more defensively and tactically minded. The extra down means that the American game is more balanced between running, passing and kicking. Canadian football, on the other hand, has one less down to move the ball 10 yards, so emphasis is usually based on passing the football. Kicking is also more important in the Canadian game, as kicking the ball occurs more frequently. The 1 yard gap rule and the fact that there's only 3 downs is a severe disadvantage to the defences of Canadian teams. This means that it's pretty much an offensive shootout every game. American football players tend to be bigger in size and strength, whilst in Canadian football, the players are slightly smaller as they need to be able to move faster than their American counterparts. There are various myths about these two types of football, and I'm here to hopefully dispel some of them. Myth number 1. Canada has bigger balls. It's a common misconception that the balls in Canadian football are bigger, but the actual allowed dimensions fall into each other's specifications, meaning that in theory, both sports can use the same ball. Given also that the balls are made by the same manufacturer, it seems implausible that Wilson would have 2 different machines that make 2 different balls that vary only by a couple of millimetres.
So where did that myth come
number
from?
2. The CFL is just a graveyard for has-been NFL and college players. Actually, the CFL has produced many top players that went on to have good NFL careers, such as Joe Theismann, Warren Moon and Doug Flutie. Myth number 3.
Yeah, so with regards to that then, it's interesting that it has that, or it was a myth that older NFL players and so on, or players who couldn't make it, went to CFL. But why do you think then that Canadian football internationally is not as popular? Is it like the marketing of it? What could be done to actually draw viewers to Canadian football, do you think?
3. Canadian football has taken American football rules and blatantly changed them. I hate to burst your bubble there, Yanks, but the Canadians invented their game first.
There you go.
Myth number 4. Canadian football is inferior to American football. I wouldn't say that. I mean, sure, if you're talking about the amount of money it generates and the amount of money the players get paid, American football wins hands down. But in terms of the actual sport itself, Canadian football is not inferior, it's just different to American football. I personally watch both kinds of football regularly, and I can honestly say that I prefer Canadian football. But that's just me. You're entitled to think differently. If you found this video entirely helpful, please comment, rate and subscribe. It takes me ages to make one of these things, and good karma is appreciated. Likewise, for a further explanation of the rules of each game, see my other videos.
Yeah, go subscribe to his channel. That was very well produced, and like really the interesting comparison between those two types of football. I mean, like as I said, it's almost like 2 different sports because the rules are quite different. It's just interesting me being like a football fan, a soccer fan. Like there's obviously differences between the different countries that play it, different styles and so on, but it's fundamentally the same game, the same rules everywhere pretty much. This one is just because the 2 countries are neighbours, it's both football, but it's quite big rule changes. It really kind of affects the dynamic even when you see things like the size of the players. So very interesting to me. Canadian football does seem very exciting, seems very fun. Tell me what can be done to increase its popularity. Tell me why you like it. Tell me what teams, what players I should look out for. Maybe I'll watch that other one soon as well. Thanks.